Well, welcome to the Private Practice Elevation Podcast. Lisa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you on as well. Let's just jump right in. So, for folks who don't know who you are and what you do, why don't you just share a little bit about your story? I always encourage people to not gloss over their story because I think we learn so much about stories. So, yeah, let us know about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity. So my name is Lisa Mustard, just like you put on a hot dog, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I live in South Carolina. I've been licensed, I think, since let's see, I finished my program in 2006, and then I was, fully licensed in 2008. I've worked in a variety of settings. I have worked for a college counseling center. That's where I did my practicum and my internship, and that's where I had my first job at the University of South Carolina. I also worked on a suicide prevention grant there. From there, I went into addiction recovery. I was a family therapist with addiction recovery. And then from there, I went into working for a military branch. And I've been there, gosh, since, let's see, how old is my youngest? Since 2010, I think I've been with the military branch as either
Well,
a contractor. I've been different types of contractors, but so since 2010, I've worked for a military branch in some capacity as a contractor of some sort, first federal contractor, then a state contractor, and now I'm actually a state employee. And I help soldiers and family members with deployment related issues, reintegration issues. I help veterans. I help all kinds of folks in pretty much you wear the uniform, I can help you in that
yeah, wow.
capacity. But a couple years ago, I decided to start a podcast for a number of reasons, mainly because I was sick and tired of sitting in a chair to get my continuing education contact hours. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a way to get them via audio or podcasting? So I started the therapy show with Lisa Mustard with the intention of creating continuing education for therapists who prefer to be on the go, whether,
Mhm.
podcasting is a huge thing. And I listen to tons of podcasts. I love podcasts. And so I thought, wouldn't it be neat to have a show where you could get CEUs by listening to the content? And what I'm really proud about and what I love about my content is that content is free. So it's not hidden behind a paywall to listen. You can listen to all the content. But if you decide that you want the continuing education contact hour, that's when you purchase, I call them pod course. You purchase the pod course, you take the quiz, the evaluation, and then you can download your certificate. And Mustard Consulting is a NBCC approved provider. So that means most of the time, therapists, can get their state will approve the NBCC credential. So I'm really proud of that. I also, the podcast has allowed me to stay really excited about the world of therapy. I mean,
Yeah,
gosh, I'm sure your wife, the pandemic really kind of, took us for a loop in a lot of
yeah.
different ways. And so the podcast has allowed me to pivot my skill set and I enjoy it. I love what podcasting has brought into my world, into my life. I think it makes me a much better clinician for my soldiers and their families. And yeah, I love it. I'm so grateful that I started and that I continue to create pod courses and find interesting people to talk to and like you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I've never heard of anybody doing something like that until we met, and we actually met for those of you listening through the Psychcraft network. We're part of a podcast network, and so myself and Lisa are just meeting and collaborating with other folks who are just creating awesome content and great podcasts, and we'll link to that in the show notes too. But yeah, I was so excited just to hear you just describe the pod course thing. It's such a cool idea. Tell us just a little bit more about like the types of um, pod courses that you
Sure.
offer through there that people can get that continuing education.
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I
Yeah.
love my pod courses and the folks that have presented for me. I'm just so lucky to know these people. A lot of people ask me, like, well, where do I find my speakers? And really, they're just professionals that I know locally who really they've honed in on their niche and what they do and how they help people. So I have 10, I think 10 pod courses right now. And you guys are going to have to forgive me. I'm in the process of creating a new website and a new learning management platform. So I have 3 of the pod courses available now, but hopefully by the end of the year, I'll have all of them up and running on the new learning management platform. And you can always get your first one for free. So you can always get
Oh,
one,
cool.
yeah, one free, and we'll put the link for folks to get that one for
Yeah.
free. Um, But gosh, let's see. I have something on self-care for therapists. That's actually my very first episode was on self-care for your practice and your life. I have another one on using Ayurveda as a life coaching tool, which I think is really, really cool by a social worker who is a Ayurvedic practitioner. I have another one on Lyme disease and mental health. I actually have one on how to be an adoption resource for your clients, addiction, one on addiction, another one on eating disorders, bookkeeping, a bookkeeper who's a therapist. So she was able to come on and just talk about basic bookkeeping for therapists. What else? Um, I know I'm forgetting some. Oh, my friend Dr. Seth Scott has done one on where you put your energy and your time, like what we
Mhm.
focus on, how that grows. That's a really kind of I really I really like that one because it's not your typical like symptom treatment diagnosis. It's
Yeah.
more of a theoretical framework for where we put our attention. I really enjoy that one. Oh gosh, I mean, I'm sure I'm missing some. Oh, hypnotherapy and CBT. Oh,
Cool.
that's a cool one. And then I have some others coming out. Oh, and I just did one on play therapy, virtual play therapy. I have another one coming out on racial trauma and play therapy. And then I have one that I'm going to be doing that will come out in the beginning of the year on sex addiction. So I really just look for folks that on things that I'm interested in. I've also partnered with a company called Hopscotch, and they're using me. That sounds weird, but they're using my credential to bring their clinicians some self-study courses, and they are play therapy focused. So that's where the play therapy comes in, and I'm a newbie to play therapy. So everything I'm learning, it's like I'm brand new to it. So I feel like it's really valuable. Even if I don't do play therapy, it helps me know what it is so I can explain it maybe to soldiers and their families if I feel like they
Mhm.
need it. So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I love the range of topics that people can find there, and also you can tell that you're excited to learn from these folks that you're having on these pod courses, and so that's pretty cool. I love it.
Thanks. Thanks.
Cool. Well, let's kind of segue a little bit to what we're talking about today, and that's kind of a perfect tee up. Talking about podcasting,
Mhm.
and specifically, how do you market a business or a private practice via being a guest on other
Mhm.
podcasts? And
Mhm.
this is something that I'm excited to dig into. As I said before we hit record here, because this is one thing that I talk to our SEO clients about all the time. We do, you can do so much work on your website to make sure it shows up in Google. But one of the really powerful things that you can do is actually off of your website to get links from other websites. And not only that, but being a guest on a podcast helps you look like an expert. So you look like an expert to Google, and you also look like an expert to the people who are listening. So how does somebody get started if they have never been on another podcast? How do they find podcasts to be on? Like, how do you approach this for
Sure.
the therapist who's thinking, I want to get a little more exposure and reach some more people?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and it's something that I get asked a lot about, and so much of this has been trial and error for me. So I'm going to share with you guys like what I feel are best practices based on trying to start a like life coaching business or private practice. So I think it's really important if you're trying to first of all make sure your website, like Daniel is talking about, make sure it is SEO to the max. Like what you want to talk about, what your niche is, be very specific on what you want to talk about because once you go and start going on podcasts, when you start talking about those things, if you don't want to be known for those things, don't talk about them. That's my number one suggestion. So, for example, when I think back to when I first started getting on podcasts, I think for me, it was having a podcast was like people wanted to interview me because I had a podcast, they had a podcast. So we see it as like podcast swapping. But if you don't
Yeah.
have yeah, which makes sense. It wasn't always a fit though. It didn't always make sense for me to bring that person onto my podcast because my audience is therapists, right? So I would go on their podcast and talk about maybe women and therapy or life coaching for women, but it didn't necessarily make sense for them to come on my show. And they understood that
Right.
but sometimes it did. So we could usually negotiate, but it comes down to what value can you offer these podcasts. So let's just take, I don't know, maybe we should I'll just use my example of being a life coach for women in their 35 plus. So like midlife coaching is what I call myself. So I was looking for other podcasts that really spoke to that niche. I was looking for
Mhm.
shows that were gonna cater to women 30 plus, and then I would just kinda look at what they've already done and, okay, well, maybe they've already had a coach on. That's cool. What is my unique spin, or what value can I now expand upon or offer to this audience? So when I was reaching out to these podcasters, I got very specific on what I could offer them. And I would even say, I listened to your episode with so and
Yeah.
so on X, Y, and Z, and I appreciated what she shared. If you were open to it, here's what I could share to your audience. And then you get really specific, with X, Y, and Z as to what value you can bring, because it always comes down to value,
Yeah.
always comes down to value. So that's my number one tip right there is, what value can you offer to that podcast listening audience? Because that podcaster wants to know. They don't just want to invite you on to, shoot the what. They like
Yeah.
want to know, how can you help my audience?
Yeah, that actually, I thank you for that because as a podcast host myself, and I'm always looking for people to be on. Like I do get those emails that you could tell you have not listened to my podcast. I got one recently, just as a funny example, where somebody was saying something about helping dentists. And, like we're private practice elevation, and I would love to do a dental website, but the way that they were describing what they could offer had
Right.
nothing to do with my primary audience at all. And so it was, and I couldn't even find their website. It came from a Gmail thing. I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And so I usually don't respond, but I actually responded to this person. And I was like, I don't think that that's a good audience fit. And by the way, I haven't been able to find you online anywhere. So I don't think we're a good fit. I was polite, but
Right.
yeah, but if you're not offering value, and if they're not paying attention to like what you do, then they're not going to be able to provide that value. So that's kind of step one right there. Like that's perfect to start there. I love that.
Yeah, and I have to laugh because, my show is called The Therapy Show, right? I mean, therapy of some sort. I got a pitch the other day from somebody asking if I wanted to have this salesman come on and talk about like high ticket sales. I was like, "Did you even look at my show?" Like, I just thought that
Yeah,
was so funny. I was like, "How did you even find me?" But, it just goes to show that there are, you can pay a publicist to do this for you. You can pay them to do a really bad job, or, there are
yeah,
publicists out there that take the time and they really do craft a good email. I mean, I've gotten some really good emails, and those are the ones I respond to usually when
yeah,
I've taken the time to listen to your show. So that goes a long way with when you're pitching yourself to a podcaster. Also, one of the things that, as a podcast host, I'm always looking for a unique perspective on therapy, or something that my audience can learn that might have them thinking outside the box a little bit. So I've opened up the show to not just therapists. Like I reached out and asked a very popular podcaster, and her niche is sobriety and recovery, to come on my show. So I've set that up, and she's going to come on. So don't count yourself out. Like, if you think that you look at it and you're like, well, blah, blah, just give them a really good reason to consider you for their audience. Don't count yourself out. You can at least, put it out there into the universe, and see if it's going to go, because you just never know if it's going to work or not. I mean, I've been on
right.
shows that, really weren't the niche, but there's always something that I've been able to kind of, massage to make the message appropriate for their audience. And it's always great practice to be on a podcast. So just start looking for, keywords. You can even go into like Apple Podcasts and just search topics, and you'll start to see, you'll get episode with that title, or you'll get the podcast name with that title, because Apple Podcasts uses SEO in the
Hmm.
titles for you to
Yeah.
find the podcast. So that's important, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And
Mhm.
I think one thing that I actually did when I first started my podcast and I was starting to try to get my name out there a little more was I created a Google spreadsheet, and I did like what you just described. I went into Apple Podcasts and just found other people who were speaking to the people I wanted to reach. So people in private practices, therapists, and just created a list and started following them. Like you said, when you're thinking about offering value, I think it's also good to just listen to their podcast, obviously, but
Mhm.
also you can follow them on social media, like get a feel for how they speak to their audience and the types of things that they're passionate about, so that when you do make that initial connection, you've got, something to kind of start from.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love the idea of keeping a spreadsheet. That sounds very organized. Something I
I'm
should do.
extremely organized. Yeah. Because otherwise I'll forget and I won't do it. That gives me a good checklist to say, oh, I
Mhm.
reached out to this person or I didn't reach out to that person. This month I'm going to reach out to 5 podcasts. So that's kind
Yeah.
of, that's the way that I work. Otherwise I'll forget to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and, I was just as you were talking, and I was thinking about, what we're all doing with, having each other on our shows, one of the things that comes to mind is if you're not sure you wanna be a podcast guest or you don't quite know if you have the time for it, one thing you could do is just reach out to a podcaster and say, "I have this upcoming, webinar, or I have some coaching slots open, and would you be interested or would you be open to promoting it for me on your podcast?" That's kind of like sponsorship. That's kind of like offering, a little bit of money to have somebody talk about what you have to offer.
Yeah.
And I think that that can work too. In fact, I want to say, um, I haven't necessarily done that where I've offered to, pay to have like a sponsorship or an ad read, but I've considered it recently. Like, well, maybe that's another way to kind of like get my
Yeah.
show out there or get what I have to offer out there. And sometimes they'll say, yeah, give me, if they are online or in line with what you're doing and they see value in it and they vetted you and they feel comfortable, then they could say, yeah, for 25 bucks, I'll do that for you.
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, you never know. Like, just go
And
ahead and ask. Can't hurt.
yeah, I like that idea too, because sometimes it can almost be easier, especially
Mhm,
if you're feeling like maybe you're not ready to step into like spending 30-40 minutes talking on a podcast, so like you just want to get a little more exposure, so just creating an ad that someone can read or you read, and it's just kind of it's done, and then you can
mhm,
kind of see how that comes back to you, like are you getting more hits to your website, are you getting more people signed up for that webinar, like, and that really helps you just get in front of another
mhm.
audience. And
Yeah.
I think that that's kind of the biggest thing is, for me at least, when I was just getting started and still like just trying to find my audience and reach more people, because someone has already done that work. These podcasters, they've already built an audience, and now you can think creatively, how can I tap into that audience and provide value?
Yeah. Yes. It's all about, like you said, tapping in and offering value. I mean, that's everything. Another thing that came to mind, if you're on Facebook, and I don't know, maybe it's on LinkedIn as well. I just don't spend as much time on LinkedIn, but I joke around and say there's like 3,000, therapists Facebook groups on
Yeah.
on Facebook. But one of the things that I have found are there are groups on Facebook for podcast guesting. So if you just do a search on Facebook for podcast guest groups, you'll find a bunch, and there you can go into those groups and you'll see there's usually, rules around how to ask for what you need or define what you're
Right.
looking for. But, I have found some great opportunities in those groups as well. And you can just kind of stalk the group. And then when you see something that fits, you can just kind of say, oh, here's what I can offer your audience. And then, everybody has a different way of wanting to get in touch with you or you get in touch with them. But that's been a great way to kind of build more relationships, first of all, offer
Yeah.
value, and then find podcasts to guest on.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I've
Mhm.
never looked into that. That's awesome. And I think
Yeah.
to your point, like you just mentioned about relationships, that's kind of one of my favorite parts about podcast guesting or having
Mhm.
people on the podcast. And one of the reasons why I started the podcast was you get to build just such great relationships, and I have all these wonderful people who, it's not just this one episode, but then later on you see something that they're doing, like, hey, would you like me to mention that on my podcast, or I can put that in an email, just share about this thing that you're doing, because I think it would really help my
Mhm.
audience. And so you never know how these relationships will come back in the future. So just wanted to mention that. I was like, it comes down to relationship building, which is, I love that part of podcasting.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, gosh, when I was first started out, I was just reaching out to all the folks that had podcasts that I was learning from and asked them to
Yeah.
come on the show. And part of it was intentional because I knew that they had a bigger audience than I did, but I was also looking to grow relationships and just kind of get into that world of, podcasting and kind of grow my network and my audience and my influence
Right.
within that world. But yeah, I mean, that's probably been one of the biggest surprises is just who I've met and who I've connected with, and just the growth and the opportunities that have presented themselves. It's
Yeah.
it's really, really amazing what
Yeah.
podcasting has done for me. It's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's get back to, okay, you've found somebody, you found
Mhm.
these podcasts that you want to be on. And so let's say you're going to be a guest on this podcast. What do you feel are some ways that you can make the most of that? And
Mm.
I'm kind of thinking like ideally with someone who's got a private practice in mind, or like yourself has a coaching business. So they're looking to get more potential clients. Like what are some things that they can do marketing wise to get the most out of episodes? So it's not just, hey, I was just featured here, you listen to it and then it just kind of gets lost on the internet.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things, I mean, gosh, there's a lot of things that you can do. And depending on the social media platforms that you're on, I mean, the sky's the limit. One of the things that I know you probably would recommend is put a link on your website, to that episode, like a featured guest. Like I have a featured guest image. So, like when you come on my show, if that's something that you put on your website, I'll give you an image and then you can have a link to my episode and vice versa. So there, right there, there's a backlink that you're creating
Yeah.
and growing. You can also do so you can put like if you have a link tree, or something like that. You know what a link tree is, right? Where you have all the different things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
so you probably always want to have a link in there, listen to my episode on the private practice elevation here. And you then link directly to that episode. You also want to maybe do some more video. Video is great for social media. You could do a couple videos, talk about what you shared on the episode, post them up on your wall. You could do a live. You could, it really just depends on what you're already doing. I think you just kind
Yeah.
of do some more of that when it comes to the episodes that you're on. And the good thing is, podcasting is evergreen. So it's always going to be up there and people are going to discover you. Hopefully every
Yeah.
day somebody new is going to find you. So that's why I love podcasting. It's rare they take it down,
Hmm.
so it's usually gonna be up there. I'm trying to think what other things you could be doing. If you have a new, email newsletter, you could be,
Yeah.
promoting that. You could even, like, have a button, in your email that's like, "Listen," just like you would a link tree, like, "Find me on these episodes." Like, in my email signature, I have listened to the therapy show on this platform, and then I have a link to all the different places you can listen to the podcast. What else could you do? I think that's off the top of my head, like what I've been doing.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's a good punch
Yeah.
list right there.
Okay,
The
good.
the
I was
only
like,
only thing that I would maybe add to that is, like you said, the featured on, when you get those graphics, I think that having that like on your homepage or your about
mhm,
page is great social proof. When someone
mhm,
is considering to, working with you, and you have this list, and if you're just getting started, it might only be like one or two logos there, but once, over time, you might have all these logos of all these podcasts and places you've been featured. And
right.
I think for a therapist who's, people are coming to you and they're in sometimes very, very hard times in their life. They're working through very difficult challenges. They want somebody they can trust. And then they are kind of reviewing, okay, who can I work with? Who's in my area? Who handles the challenges I need help with? And they see the
Mhm,
featured on as like, oh wow, this person's an expert if they've been featured on all these different podcasts. And
mhm.
so I think that it's really powerful. I think that can really help with booking those potential clients who come to the website.
Yeah, one of and this just kinda struck me. So this is an interesting way that I got a new client was Google My Business. So I post to Google My Business at least once a week, at least, and every time I have a new episode, I put my new episode up, and I got a new client, a new coaching client that way, and I asked her, "How did you find me?" And she said, "Oh, I just Googled." And I was like, "Whoa." So 'cause usually you hear Psychology Today or, something like that,
Yeah.
but she said, "No, I just Googled, like, therapists near me." and then you popped up, and I thought, "Wow, that's interesting." So don't count out that whole Google My Business. I think, or I
Yeah.
don't know what they're calling it now. Maybe they've changed it.
Google Business Profile.
Mhm. Yeah, there you
They
go. That's what
keep
it is.
changing it. Yes, they keep
Yeah.
changing it.
So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting. And then, it's kinda like these things take time to grow legs, but once they start, people will refer to you, right? Like if they hear you on a podcast, they're going to refer to you. And that's happened to me um as well, not so much for like life coaching, but for business coaching, which I was never expecting. I didn't really put myself out there, but I had some therapists reach out and say, "Hey, can I schedule an hour with you? I really like what you're doing, and I want to do something similar, or I want to like figure out a way to pivot my skill set."
Yeah.
And that's been cool. Like so I think the more, like you said, grow your social proof, grow your expertise, grow your authority. It's like when I get on someone's website and see they've been featured in Forbes and Business Insider, or, whatever, I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
wow, that's some clout right there," you know?
Yeah. And sometimes I think it's also like a little subconscious. It's not like
Mhm,
I spend time when I look at a website, like it's usually like I pass right over it, but there is this pause in my brain, especially when I'm working with a potential client, on redesigning their website, and they've
mhm.
already got a lot of that social proof. Like, okay, cool. Like, wow,
Yeah,
like people are coming to this website. Like
right.
we're gonna take it to the next level. And I like what you just said about like this takes time.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people don't get into like the new thing for marketing, or, getting their feet wet with podcasting or writing guest articles on other websites, because yeah, it takes a little bit of work, but it can be a little scary to kind of like put yourself out there to all these other these other websites, this new audience and that sort of thing. But you can get your feet wet.
mhm,
You can do, let's just do one this month, and then maybe you come back to it. You get used to it.
mhm.
It's definitely not an overnight thing. And I've been doing this, I think, 2 years now with my podcast, and I'm still learning. I'm like not taking any courses on how to interview people. I'm like, I'm just chatting with people. Like, who am I to like just chat with these people and have other people listen to it? But it's fun, and you get used to it, you get better, and it does take
It
time.
does, yeah, it does, and, so if you do get invited onto a podcast and you feel like it wasn't the best, or you feel like my daughter says cringy, don't worry about it, just it's practice. I mean, I always remind people, think about the first time you sat with a client. Like, think about that. Like, I don't think it gets
Mm,
much scarier or
right.
awkward than the first time you sat with a client. Podcasting, just, go into it, have fun, and
Yeah.
don't go on shows where you wouldn't you know, don't go on shows that don't, resonate with you. So you don't have to
Yeah.
go on everything just because it sounds like it would be good for you. Because if your energy and your vibes don't jive, then it's pretty obvious. And
Yeah.
you don't have to do all of them. Do the ones that you like listening to, or that speak to you, or that you find value in. And
Yeah.
I think that's an important piece as well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I don't think I ever really go back and listen to any podcasts that I've been on, whether I felt like it went good or bad. It's just, I'm excited to make that connection with that person. I'm excited to add, as much value as I can. But I feel like if I go back and listen to it, then I'm going to start like analyzing, like, oh, I sounded like silly there, or whatever. Like that didn't come off well, blah, blah, blah. So I just have made it a practice to just, you do it, you provide, you offer the value, and then you move on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, definitely. It's it's it is kind of weird to like listen to yourself afterwards. I like to listen to myself afterwards just to kind of, okay, what did I share? What did I forget to share? I make notes
Hmm.
on, what else do I want to share next time I'm asked to speak on this? But besides that, I don't listen too hard because no,
Yeah.
I've been doing so many of them. I feel like I don't have enough time right
Right.
now
Yeah.
to as my show grows, and as I'm doing other things like, oh yeah, oh, I was on that show, great. I do definitely want to share it out for the person that I'm on, because I that's a huge part of it
Yeah.
too, is you have to share it out. Um they can't do all of the work for you, and
Absolutely.
you definitely want to share it out with your audience that you were on the show, as well as they're going to share it. So do them that favor. And
Yeah.
also it's also really kind for you to give them a rating and review. I've been asking my guests to do that too
Yeah.
recently,
Mhm.
because that helps the podcast, get more listeners, and ultimately could help you get more clients or more business.
Yeah. Yep, I do. We do that too. Yeah, once the episode goes live, we just give them all the resources that they would need to share it, and then we
Mhm.
ask them for a review. So if you're listening to this podcast, definitely go and review, and then head over to Lisa's podcast and then give her a review as well after you listen to some episodes.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else that you want to that people need to know about being a guest on other podcasts for marketing
Mm,
their practices?
let me think.
Not to put you on the spot. It's
Yeah,
okay.
no, I'm just like I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I know we
Anything
did.
we missed?
Um, I don't think so. Let me think. Oh, what? So one thing that I do want to share is, so don't be afraid to like ask twice. You know, if you're in the process of emailing people and asking them if you can come on their show, if you're letting them know like, hey, I listened to X, Y, and Z, this is what I found, I would love to share this value. If they don't write you back, a number of things could be going on. Number one is you're just not a fit for the show, and they're like you and me, they don't have time to like respond to everything. Or
Mhm.
number two, they're super super busy and they get your email and they're like, oh, this does sound interesting, let me put it on my to-do list, and then they get busy. So don't be afraid to follow up within a week or two. If you keep following up and they don't respond, then I would say like, okay, that's definitely the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
But for example, I had somebody reach out to me in March and I forgot about it. And then something reminded me, oh, and then I reached out back like this week and said, hey, I would love to have this person be a guest. Is he still available? So it's not always you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll agree with that. There's been, a number of times where people reach out like, "Oh, this would be a good fit." Like, but I'll come
Mhm.
back to it, and then you forget to come back to it, and it's nothing on their end. It was all me.
Right, right. Yeah, and I've
Yeah,
I've probably got people that I need to follow up with, come to think of it, that have said that they wanted to be on the show, and they said reach back
yeah,
out to me in August, and here we are, almost November, and I have not
yeah,
done that yet. So, you know, podcasting is so new and exciting, and there's so many different ways to reach out to people, and so many different everybody does it differently with like their systems and how soon they
yeah,
record and then how far out they book. So,
yeah.
everybody's different. There's no like playbook for how this works. So,
Right.
it feel be consistent, but yet don't be obnoxious, I guess is what I'm getting
Yeah,
at.
yeah, yeah. Good advice. All right, awesome. Well, where can people find you, Lisa, if they want to listen to the podcast or check out your website? Let us know where everyone can find it.
Yeah. Well, my website is lisamustard.com. And like I said, we are working on a whole new website experience for everybody. Eventually, that will be up and running, hopefully in a couple days or so. My website guy, actually, I'm supposed to talk to him today.
All
And
right.
then all my pod courses will be migrated over to that site as well. You can connect with me, oh gosh, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can email me. I mean, all the things, I guess. And if you have a suggestion for the show or you're curious about being a guest, you can always send me an email, hello@lisamustard.com, and we can go from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, Lisa, and it was great chatting with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.